Hey guys, I just wanted to go over my full mod list for my 2012 Yamaha FZ1. So this is the Sport Touring. It's got the half cowl on the front. It's naked. It's a naked bike. It's got the stressed frame, so the motor is under the frame. And I waited quite a while before I really changed much on this, but since I've gotten more used to the bike, more comfortable, I've just made a few changes that I wanted to go over real quick. So the first thing I'll point out are these matching adjustable, this is the clutch lever, this is the front brake lever, and these are adjustable. I can adjust at how close or how far the handle is from the lever is from my handle, so that's a nice feature to have. These are really inexpensive. I like the black with the red. If you have an FZ1, the white version anyway, with the black tail like mine, then you'll notice that the stock coil is red, and there's so much black on here. I think the black and red go really well together with that. So the adjustable clutch and brake levers, that's one addition. I've got GoPro camera mounts, one on the front handlebar, and I've got one on the rear peg, right above the rear set anyway. I've just got it mounted to the side of the rear peg frame, coming off right here on the side. So I've got a rear camera and a front camera. I run those every single time I get on the bike. It's kind of a backup just in case I'm ever in a hit and run, or if I witness somebody else riding with me getting hit, or somebody lane changing or turning in front of somebody. I've got it on camera, but it also makes for fun video. These mirrors, these are bar end mirrors, so you take the original bar end out and then just bolt in. This has a rubber grommet on the inside, and when you tighten this bolt in the end, it tightens up the bar that goes through. And then this just has a set screw on here that tightens up this arm so that this arm doesn't rotate. So you kind of set this arm to where you want it and clamp it down with this screw. And then the arm, on the back of the arm, there's actually a ball socket right here in the back of the mirror itself, so that this can be tilted up and down, left and right. I set these up so where they're horizontal, so there's just a better view. I've seen a lot of times where people will drop these down and put them vertical. It definitely makes it not as wide, but with the turning on here, as you can see how close this handle is, if I had this down underneath, I would be jamming it into the tank, because my tank's pretty wide. Another addition I've added is the throttle lock. So the way the throttle lock works is I can turn the handle and then get my speed to where I want it, and then I can lock this down and it holds the handle. So this is cruise control. I've seen some paddle style where it kind of locks onto the handle, and if you have your hand on it, if you press down on the pad, it'll hold it down. I've not used those. I've always used the same exact same brand. I've always used the same throttle lock on every bike that I've added one to. I've had two bikes, and a buddy of mine that I worked with down in Orlando, he would actually keep one of these with him if he ever went and bought a bike, and that's the first thing he'd put on one. It's great for long distance. You can set it just like cruise control. There's a little tensioner in the top here that makes it so that it grips just enough to where it'll let go of the throttle. You don't want this thing so tight that when you pull this down, you know, this is just something that you set with your thumb. So when you're riding, you're in gear and you get your speed where you want it, and then you just set this down with your thumb. Well, when you want to take that off, you don't want that controlling the speed anymore, then you just release it. So locked, released. Another addition I had was, because I set the mirrors on the bar ends, I did not want the big mirrors. You probably remember the mirrors came up and they're pretty high off the bike, and they give it this really big high stance look. So what I did is I went on Inventables and found a printout that somebody had made for a 3D printer so that I could print covers for the holes where the mirrors used to be. So I printed these covers in a carbon fiber and then sprayed them in a gloss black. And for whatever reason, when I set these out in the sun, this is the frame, the way that it's built inside on the 3D printer. It builds it in this grid. And for some reason, when I painted it, these areas were in between must have gotten a little bit hotter with the paint sitting outside in the heat or in the sun or whatever, and it kind of bulged these and kind of makes it look a little bit like a honeycomb. It's like that on both of them. I went ahead and printed 2 sets, so if these didn't work or I put the wrong kind of tape or paint on them, I could just swap them out. Another update I did was I went with the black screen, but I didn't just go with the stock screen that I purchased. I actually cut down the original screen, the windscreen. So the windscreen on this looked like a big, huge, bruised black thumbnail, and I didn't like the look of it being that high. The clear one is, the clear stock windscreen is the same height as this dark screen, but what I wanted was a sportier look, and I still wanted it to cover up the gauge cluster and the cowl behind it. So I determined my length and cut the cowl down. Now the top of this is really smooth. It looks like it came that way from the factory, and I'll show you in a second. Let me just put this down. As you can see, I had an area back here that I wanted to cover from the front. So this little area, this rise in the cowl, is actually covered from the front from the wind, and still protects the gauge cluster that's behind it. It still protects this. I'm used to riding on a bike that doesn't have a cowl at all, so the wind isn't an issue. Actually, the issue I had was the original screen with its height. It would actually divert the wind right into my face, right into the front of my helmet. So it actually made the wind worse than if it was just a naked bike and I was just getting some wind. But when I cut this down, this actually diverts the wind more right across, almost into my stomach, lower chest area. So it's really easy to kind of adjust to the wind when it's coming over. I don't have a problem with that wind coming over. I think you can probably see here the edge of this just kind of looks like glass. It's really smooth. I used a hacksaw to cut it in half, just with a metal blade on it by hand. I put a piece of tape across here where I wanted it, and then I cut along the piece of tape with the hacksaw with the metal blade. And then I switched to probably 120 grit sandpaper, and then 80, and then eventually I got down to wet sandpaper that I use for like a headlight restoration, and this is just as smooth as it can get. A kit that I bought was for integrating the turn signals. If you remember, the stock turn signals stuck out, and it was this big orange thing that was about 3 inches long, and the light stuck way out. So I wanted a flush. So this is a flush turn signal, and the way the turn signal works, the way I have it wired up, and you can wire it different ways, in the manual, the instruction manual for installing this actually comes with the information on how you want to wire it. So the way I have it wired is these are not on when the bike is turned on. The way it works is these only come on when I turn them on. So that's how that works. And in the rear, if you remember, there was a big huge tail that came all the way down here, and then the turn signal, sorry, not even showing you in the video, I'm paying too much attention here. The tail came all the way down here, and there was a big turn signal here and a big turn signal. They're identical front to rear, but it had that same big turn signal. It was about 3 inches wide that stuck out. So what I wanted to do is get a Fender Eliminator. So my Fender Eliminator came with a license plate light. It came with a lightly tinted tail light, and the turn signals are integrated into the tail light. So I don't have extra little turn signals off to the side of the license plate bracket. The turn signals are actually in the tail light, and the turn signals are sequential. So I'm just going to turn on the hazard light so you can see this. So these are sequential. So the light actually starts in the middle and goes out. So that's with the hazard on, so this is turning, so it's obvious from the back which way I'm turning. The light is really easy to see, but it's sequential. It starts in the middle and works its way out. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. It does the same on the other side, and at the same time I've got my turn signal, the flash turn signal, up on the front. Now the turn signal is bright enough that anybody that's riding along can see when I'm turning, and I like the tail light. The tail light, when you, I'll show you real quick, get the power back on. The tail light itself, when you hit the brake like this, actually flashes first before it turns on. So it's dim, it flashes real bright, and then it stays bright. That is a big upgrade from the stock tail light. The last thing I have that's in addition on this one is I have these handlebar risers. So between here and here, this used to sit flush with the top of this, and these are just some handlebar risers. So these handlebar risers, they were on the bike when I got them, but this is a real standard type of riser. It had just come with longer bolts, so the original bolts went through this and straight into here, so they were shorter. So the longer bolts just compensate by adding this much distance. So these are about an inch. So what happens when you change this is the handlebar itself is raised up a little bit, so you don't have to lean over quite as much to get the to hold the handlebars. So there was I'm trying to remember, I believe on, let's see, trying to get the throttle lock on, and then trying to get this little bit of the metal, because this is thicker than the end where it was with the bar end that was on their stock. So this is a little bit, it kind of pushes into the handle, so I just ran air under this to push the handlebars a little bit closer in. So the handlebars themselves aren't any shorter, this is still stock, but I wanted to turn the handlebars, and on the inside of these there's these locator pins. So I took everything off the end because I was already going to put this on, and I was already putting the bar and mirror on. So what I did was I took everything off the end of the handlebar. Once I marked where I wanted the handlebar tilted to the position that I wanted it in instead of the stock position. I'm not sure if this, I think the stock position had it more up and I wanted it down more. So when I took this all off, I marked where the angle was, and then I marked when I dropped it down, and then I moved the little locator pin hole down and re-drilled my pinholes for the locators on these so that the pinhole would go back into the new hole based on how I rotated it down. I've pretty much covered everything I've done on this. I use, I do the brake pad changes myself. I do the oil changes myself. I don't do tire changes. I've got to go somewhere to have the tire changed out. I have not changed the size in the tire. I've still just got the stock tire. And I believe these are the Pilot. No, I had the Pilot before, and this time I went with Michelin, but that's not really an upgrade. This is still the stock chain and sprockets. I bought it with 3,900 miles, and I've got, let's see, 13,000 on it now. So I've almost put on 10,000 miles in, let's see, I bought this in 2014, so in 6 or 7 years I put on 10,000 miles, mostly just riding back and forth to and from work. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, I'm gonna post links to some of these things in the description, but if you have any questions about anything, you would have to look specifically for these, like the levers or the windscreen, to make sure it fits the same year that you're that you're using. This is just the stock pipe. It had an aftermarket pipe when I got it, but if you know these bikes well enough, they have the X-Up system, which is, there's a servo motor underneath the tank here, and that servo has two cables that go down, and they open and close a baffle that's in the down pipe, the mid pipe, and that adjustment on that baffle actually increases your compression, so you maintain horsepower throughout the entire RPM range. That's, as far as my research, that's the purpose of that. So the aftermarket one that was put on here, they actually just undid the cables and took the whole system out and just slipped a new pipe on. So the pipe was still there, but the servo motor just was always actuating, thinking it was adjusting, but it wasn't adjusting anything anymore. So Yamaha's been doing this X-Up for a while, so I figured they probably knew better than just taking that off and leaving it. There's some reason that they put that on there. It's not a it's not a it's not like a, whatever it's called, the it's not an EPA thing. It's for power. So I just took that aftermarket pipe off, which I'm pretty sure was a Vance and Hines, and I just put the stock pipe back on. So when I bought this from the owner before me, he still had the stock pipe with him, so I got it with the bike. One update that I would like to do is I would like to update both of these seats to the Corbin seats. The guy that I worked for down in Orlando before I moved to North Carolina always told me that every time he buys a bike, he ends up putting the Corbin seats on it. I've ridden on bikes that have the Corbin seat, and by far, for the quality, it's the best price. There's some other seats that are actually more expensive, but that's pretty much all I've got. I run a tank bag on here with anything that I need to carry, wallet. I put my phone in there. I've actually got a review on a Bluetooth headset that I have for my helmet. I have an Arai helmet. I had a Shoei before, but an Arai just fit my head better. Yeah, so wiring information, any kind of stuff like that for the flush turn signals or for the Fender Eliminator kit, all that kind of information would be something you'd have to look at if you're interested enough and wanted to buy something to add to your bike. If you've got another update you have on your bike and that's the same as mine. This is a 2012 Yamaha FZ1, so I think 2010 through 2015, maybe even earlier than that, were all about the same. There's some color differences. The next year, I believe, after mine, they went with a white tank and a white tail. I like this, that the tank in the front is the only thing that's white, so the back end just kind of disappears. I like the look of that better. I looked at the red one that had the gold front forks. The gold didn't do it for me, so I didn't go with that, and I couldn't find one that hadn't been hacked to pieces. This one was in mint showroom condition when I bought it. There wasn't a scratch on it. The previous owner had put this Pro Grip. This is almost more like a I believe it adds some value as far as like it gripping on the front of your pants or if you're laying down on the tank, but it also is I think it helps to keep your zipper from scratching up your tank. That's one of the guesses I had on a good reason to put it on there anyway. But so far, all the updates that I've added are beneficial for me, either ergonomically, cosmetically, or functional. Safety-wise even, I think that the Fender Eliminator kit that I have is actually a better upgrade than the stock taillight. The fact that it flashes, and I like the sequential turn signals in the taillight. So I don't really have anything else looks-wise to change. If I was to get a programmer and add a little bit more power, I could do that, but this has plenty of power. I'm not going to the racetrack. So anyway, like I said, if you have any questions or comments, just leave them below the video. Like the video, please. Subscribe to the channel. Share the channel, share the video. I appreciate it.